Hey everybody, welcome back. It is the Razzball Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend, the mustachioed fantasy master Lothario himself, Gray Albright. How you doing, Gray?
What's going on, man? I'm good. I'm good. I actually had I had an interesting a week last week on the picket line, the WGA picket line. Well, I'm Writers Guild, and so we've been on strike for a few months, and then SAG recently came on strike, which is actors for people who don't know, um, and uh, and that went from like it's so funny because now like on the picket line it's like you can easily see the difference between a writer and an actor. Like you don't even have to you don't have to ask them a single question. Like you could just be like, yeah, that's an actor. That person who is drop dead gorgeous. Yeah, that's not a writer. Absolutely, absolutely not a writer. Absolutely. And then there's like people huddled in the corner trying to get shade from the sun. It's like, yeah, those are writers. Absolutely, they are absolutely writers. So anyway, so I was on the picket line last week, and I ran into someone. So this is funny. So for people who don't know, I have an old keeper league. Like I've been in it for like 20 years. Like it's like my oldest league. That's currently going. I was in fantasy leagues before the keeper league, but this is my oldest league that's been going. Actually, Laura, who's a writer for the site, she her articles drop on Friday. She's in the league too. Her and her husband. Anyway, so long story short, so I'm in this long time keeper league, and it's a bunch of comedy writers. And when I entered the league 20 years ago, I was told that I was replacing because before me was Odenkirk and David Cross from Mr. Show. I think people are familiar with who they are. So anyway, so I'm on the picket line, and I've never actually had any communication with these guys. I just was told that they were in the the league before me. So anyway, so I run into Bob Odenkirk on the picket line last week, and I'm like, "Hey, Bob, this is gonna sound weird." So I start saying the names that are in the league, and I'm like, and like the fantasy team you gave me like was awful. It was terrible. I'm like, Bob, I'm a fan of your work, right? Like I really liked Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad. Like you're great. But man, the team you put together was just awful. Like really bad. Like I don't know what you were thinking. And then he's like, man, I wish this was me, but I've never played fantasy. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I was told you were in the league with David Cross, and he's like, oh no, David was a fantasy guy, so he was probably in the league. But you're thinking of Steve Odenkirk. He was probably in the league, not me. I'm like, oh. You know, that whole thing about like trading away Hanley, forget I said anything. I was like, anyway, keep
Uh,
the stuff I said about how good you are and Better Call Saul, and forget everything I said about 20 baseball players from 22 years ago.
the terrible team you left me with that you really did not actually have anything to
Not
do with.
really you. Yeah, it was David Cross, I guess, was in the league. Anyway, it's a short story. Okay.
I have never been in a fantasy league with anybody that's famous outside of the fantasy sporting world. So you've got me, Gray. You've got me beat on even a little bit
I
of
also I don't
celebrity
know if
there.
I should I don't know if it's okay to say, but the because he's been since canceled, but the the league used to be like the Laura's husband was roommates with Louis C.K. I think that's where the league used to draft was like in Louis C.K.'s apartment. I don't know. I wasn't in the league at that point. So anyway, that's what I've been told. Obviously, I was wrong about the Odekirk thing, so who knows? I don't know.
You have no idea what's going on.
I don't know what happened before I was in the league. I don't know that.
No, it
Anyway,
was CK Smith, the completely unknown person, just a random dude.
yeah, it's like no. What was it was actually he used to wear a lot of CK the cologne, Calvin Klein. God.
We just all called him CK. I don't know where you got the Louis from. Maybe he was a lefty. Maybe we call him Louis CK because he was lefty that wore the same cologne. Way too much of it all the time.
Actually, it's funny that one of the guys he wrote for Rasball for a brief moment, and he was like, the commenters were too brutal to him, and he's actually he's now writing for the New Yorker, and he's like a famous he's done a lot of stuff. I wouldn't say he's famous, but he's done a lot of things, but he couldn't handle the Rasball commenters.
See, this is why I've lasted as long as I have. I don't write enough things to get bad commenters, and I get people just yelling at their podcasting device instead.
He's like, yeah. I mean, he did stand up for like 25 years. He's like, the most brutal audience is the Rasball commenters. Anyway, okay.
He wasn't even here around. Like that was. I mean, if that was that long ago, he wasn't even around when like there was all the extra social media outlets that you can get completely destroyed on and not even have any idea about it.
Yeah. No, totally.
All right, so let's move on to some random other rumors, Gray, since that's pretty much what it sounds like this league was based on.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some trade rumors that could happen. I think some of the bigger ones are always around some pitchers. Feels like they're easier to kind of just maneuver around and stick in a rotation and say, go do your thing, especially now in the era of like, the communication devices and everything. I mean, at the top of the list, I think, is Dylan Cease, who is supposedly ungettable, but it's the White Sox. So ungettable means that they're probably going to IL him for a phantom injury at some point soon. I don't know. It's the White Sox. What are you thinking about some of the trade rumors? Let's just discuss some things and where we think some people can land.
Yeah. Well, Dylan Cease, I think he's being coveted. Well, he's probably coveted by a lot of teams. Everyone needs pitching, right? I heard the Astros are in on Cease. I don't know how accurate. I should say up front, I don't know how accurate any of these rumors are. As my Bob Odenkirk story shows, I'm not sure. I just go off of what I've been told. I don't know if it's accurate. So anyway, with that said, yeah, Dylan Cease, I think potentially could be traded. I mean, I know Giolito is definitely, like, if you're going on the White Sox specifically, Giolito's, I think, definitely getting traded. I mean, the White Sox would be so stupid if they don't trade Giolito. I would be shocked if he doesn't get moved. They're also, I mean, I would guess they're probably, I mean, they would be stupid to not, we're not going to go through every single team, but the White Sox are one team where, like, Tim Anderson, Jake Berger, who's been good, like, don't get me wrong, like, Berger's actually been good, but if I could get anything for him, I would if I was the White Sox. Cease and Giolito, and then, anyone maybe in the bullpen. I would say Tim Anderson, I almost feel like he could get traded to, like, I've heard the Dodgers potentially interested in Tim Anderson. So I would say if the Dodgers were giving me anything, if I'm the White Sox, I would take it for Tim Anderson. I mean, he looks cooked, right? I mean, he doesn't look great. Unfortunately, his last bat flip. Like, if you're Tim Anderson, do you if you finally hit a home run, do you even bat flip at this point, or is this like so embarrassing? You just put the bat down, lower your head, and round the bases.
Kind
right?
of a walk of shame for a home run.
Yeah,
that equivalent.
It's almost like at this point, if he were to bat flip, it'd be like sarcastic. I think Tim Anderson. I would say, like, the Dodgers have the Dodgers always have arms to give. Maybe if I were the Dodgers, I would probably send Miguel Vargas. Like, if someone's like willing to take him because he wasn't great this year, but he still has somewhat of a pedigree. So, and if I were the White Sox, I would try like Vargas for Anderson. I mean, that's an easy trade if I'm the White Sox. I would definitely take him, Vargas, that is. So I don't know, but I would say Giolito and Anderson for sure are getting moved. Staying with Chicago, I got to think Marcus Stroman moves. Like, there's no reason why the Cubs are going to hold on to Stroman. Stroman and Bellinger, I think they're both probably on the move. I would say Stroman, absolutely. Bellinger, maybe less likely, but still possible. I think Stroman, I would say, unless the Cubs are able, like, unless they've talked to these guys and they're like, well, we can do a long-term deal with them. But Stroman, I've heard linked to the Rays, which, honestly, any pitcher going to the Rays, I'm interested. But if Stroman goes anywhere else that's like potentially I don't know. I mean, I don't like Stroman really. From a fantasy perspective, like it's just not he's not really as good as you might think. Like he's fine if he keeps the ball down and the ratios are good. But if he goes to like a hitter's park, I don't know. It depends on where he goes, honestly. Like if Stroman goes to the Rays, that's kind of good. If Stroman goes to the Dodgers, I think that could potentially be bad. Like LA, Dodger Stadium is really not the best of pitchers' parks, even though some people might think that. Bellinger, I say bring Bellinger home. Bring him back to the Dodgers. Let's go. The Cubs have fixed him. Send them back, man. Right? I don't know. So on those guys that I've in the Chicago teams, anything jumping out at you there?
I guess on the White Sox side, I've actually seen there's like this crazy offer or invisible made up trade where Louis Robert and Cease or Giolito would be going to the Astros. That seems, I mean, that seems like a stretch. Robert's finally coming around, but maybe the White Sox could use this and just say we'll trade him at max value because I mean I don't know that. I mean, he's having a great season. I don't know if he's going to continue to get better off of this or stay healthy even longer than he has this season. Every single pitcher other than Justin Steele on the Cubs can go. Stroman, Smiley, Tyon, Hendricks. That goes to the relievers, Alzolay, Leiter. If anybody wants anybody else in that bullpen, I would think the same pretty much for the White Sox. I mean, they have Kendall Graveman, who's been in the role. That's not really a long-term thing for them. I'm sure they would love to move him and Reynaldo Lopez. I mean, if we're looking at Cody Bellinger, he's there for 1 year. The Cubs kind of talked to him about maybe signing an extension. It doesn't sound like that's going to happen. So yeah, go ahead and move him. And on the other pitchers, I think the Mets obviously spent a ton of money on a bunch of old people, so I would imagine they would love to get rid of some of the contracts that they handed out earlier this year.
Yeah, no, completely. I think probably, I mean, if I were the Mets, I would definitely move Scherzer and Verlander. If they're able, like, if they do that, I would say, I mean, it puts the Mets in a weird position because I think, like, the Mets, even though they're not contending this year, I think they were kind of under the assumption that they were not necessarily like moving on from their old pitchers this quickly. I don't know. It's a weird place for them. I think they're best off like moving Verlander and Scherzer. Like absolutely, like they should move them. If they like the Mets are not really in a place for rebuilding though is the thing. It's like if the Mets can get someone like a guy who is potentially able to like play immediately, like that I think would be interesting to them. I think that's more interesting to them than going and taking a bunch of prospects for these guys because the Mets are not really like in rebuild mode, like they're not like looking to get at like a 19-year-old who might be good in 3 years. Like, I think the Mets want, like, if the Mets were able to get someone like, that's able, like, that's already in the major leagues, that's interesting, like, I don't know, say, like, I don't know, say Chas McCormick or Brian De La Cruz, or, someone who's already playing, I think that might be interesting to the Mets. I don't really see them just like, taking the random flyer on a bunch of prospects. Maybe I'm wrong though, but it's just like the way that front office has built this Mets team. It's just like, what do you do with, like, I don't know, with a bunch of prospects? Unless you're thinking like, I will take prospects and then this offseason we'll move those prospects for other guys. I mean, maybe, I don't know. The Mets are just like, that's the problem with like buying for right now, which you see like for the last 10 years, I think, with the Yankees. You see, like, when you're buying guys for right this season, then you really don't have like the influx of guys like, where like the Reds, for instance, where, everyone's now come of age and the team looks good. Speaking of the Reds, so I heard Jonathan India. I actually, right before we came on to the podcast, I heard Jonathan India was a potential for getting moved. I think I said this like a month or so ago, and people were like saying I was an idiot. It's
That
like,
might have been me.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know who it was, but I mean, it seems obvious to me that India would be, a trade piece, because like they are so stacked in the middle infield. Like, India's not necessary anymore for them, and he's still got a decent pedigree. He's young. I mean, I would, if I were the Reds, I would absolutely move India, and I would be able to get. I think you could get someone really like solid too for India. I would venture a guess that you could get someone like Giolito for India. Like, I would, if I were the White Sox, going back to what I said earlier, if I'm the White Sox, absolutely trade Giolito for India, or Cease even. I think India would be a great piece for a lot of teams. Or if you're like the Padres, and you finally, like, the Padres actually feel like they're in a similar boat as the Mets, where it's like, I could see them trading like Josh Hader for sure, but another, like, but if you're the Padres, are you trading like really big bats? Like, are you trading like a Soto? Or because you also, I feel like if you're the Padres, you kind of want to like, you still want to be a contender. Like, you don't want to like go into a rebuild mode. But if I'm the Padres and I can get like India for, like, I don't know, Joe Musgrove, or Hader. Like, imagine, like, that would screw up for fantasy. That would screw up Diaz a little bit, I think. I think Diaz would move to the eighth inning. I don't think people would necessarily love that for fantasy if Hader went to the Reds. But if you can get Hader and shorten the games in Cincy, or Joe Musgrove, if you can get Musgrove and Hader for India, I would absolutely do that. If I'm the Reds, I would do that to try and make a run at it for this year.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You can clearly see what's missing for the Reds. It's pitching, and in that park, you need some pretty good pitching. There's some very specific pitching, if not good. Like, you definitely need ground ball guys. If they're not going to be good, at least keep the ball in that park. I think taking on either Musgrove or Darvish's contract could kind of, it's probably more than the Reds want to take on. But if the Padres pay some, or, like you said, if they're getting one of those guys plus somebody else like a Hater, I think that could kind of, that could be enough where they'll go ahead and take the money. I know Musgrove and Darvish still have a number of years on their contracts though, so that's one where Cincinnati's probably gonna have to get some money. But the way San Diego's been spending it, if you can get a guy like India locked in for the next 3 years on arbitration numbers, that helps that infield out a little bit
It
as
would be
well.
so, I mean, it would honestly, sorry not to interrupt, but it'd be like India, like just thinking of India in that lineup, like putting him at leadoff and stopping with that whole like Cronenworth, Kim, Grisham nonsense, like putting India there. Oh man, I would honestly, I would love that move for India going to San Diego, even though the park would be much harder for him to homer in. I think that would be a really good move for everyone involved. Um, and then I guess moving on to the Cardinals, who I mean should be selling, even though I feel like immediately when they sell Tyler O'Neill or Dylan Carlson, they're both going to become all-stars for other teams. I mean that's obvious at this point. At this point, we know that as soon as Tyler O'Neill goes to the Yankees, he's going to become a 45 homer hitter. Like we know that. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that like Dylan Carlson or Tyler O'Neill, I think they both could move. I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Montgomery moves. I mean, I think the Cardinals the Cardinals should be moving these guys, honestly. They really should. And then if they could go like if Tyler O'Neill specifically, like I feel like he could really be good elsewhere, but it depends on where he goes. Like I could also see him moving to a place where he's a fourth outfielder slash like DH, like in a situation where he's like, like if Tyler O'Neill goes to the Rays, I think that's good for Tyler O'Neill in theory, but the Rays will absolutely platoon him. If Tyler O'Neill goes to like the Rangers, it's good, but again, I think there's a lot of teams that Tyler O'Neill could potentially be better at, but also get platooned at. And I wouldn't be surprised if the same is true for Carlson. I don't know if they're going to be everyday players where they're traded to. Like they could be. It depends on where they go. Like if Tyler O'Neill goes to like the Dodgers, I think the Dodgers stop messing around with that whole David Peralta, Johnny LaDuca, whatever the Dodgers are doing in their corner outfield there, or Jason Hayward. I think like Tyler O'Neill could really be good for the Dodgers. Like he could play every day and be great in Dodger Stadium. But he could also go like Tyler O'Neill could also go to other places where he may not play every day. So yeah, I think they move. What's your thoughts on the Cardinals? Do you have any thoughts there?
I think it's another situation where almost everybody on their pitching staff can be on the market. I mean, Mikolas, Jordan Montgomery, Steven Matz, Jack Flaherty. I don't think any of those guys scream, building blocks for the future. Cardinals were kind of making this push because they had the offense kind of in place. And they went with the veteran arms. It hasn't really worked out for a number of reasons. I think all of them could go. I think Gallegos could be on the block. Hicks could potentially be on the block, although he's 27. He has a little bit of control left. You could see them wanting to hang on to him because their offense is still good enough where if they get the right pitcher, younger pitcher or pitching prospect back, they can kind of do what they did this year again, where they jump back into the aging free agent pitcher market and just make another run at hoping the offense can carry them to a better record than it did this year. Tyler O'Neill feels like one of the most obvious ones to go out of the outfield. I mean, they have so many outfielders, they don't have room for all of them. It's kind of like the Cincinnati infield right now, or some of the other random infields that we've talked about that have
Or
gotten
also the
full. Like
or like Baltimore, the Orioles, like Mountcastle, he needs to get traded, or they need to trade someone. Maybe Cowser moves someone with the Orioles in the lineup. Like, it's bizarre for me to be saying the Orioles have too many hitters, but they really do. And they seem content on playing Aaron Hicks, which is fine. I mean, he hasn't been that bad. So I'm not going to fault them, too much for that. But I think Mountcastle really he's lost his job, and he's still so young and he's good. Like if Mountcastle can go, going back to like, potentially the Padres, like if the Padres send like, I don't know, anyone really, or Hader. Hader and Batista. Wow, that would be nasty. Hader, Batista, Cano, and Fujinama. Wow, that would be insane. But if like the Orioles and the Orioles and anyone can really figure out a deal, like the Orioles, if they could take like AJ Puck or Tanner Scott or both of those guys and move Mountcastle to the Marlins, or because from what I'm hearing on the Marlins is they want to compete, so they're not necessarily sellers. They could be buyers. So maybe Mountcastle goes to the Marlins to strengthen their lineup, and the the Orioles get like I don't know if they get like a bullpen arm, like another like a Puck or a Scott. Maybe potentially the Orioles send Mountcastle to the Tigers, and the Tigers send them back Lang. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe one of the maybe potentially I don't know, could see maybe moving to the Cardinals. Maybe the Cardinals and the Orioles figure out something but Mountcastle really should move. Like, he absolutely should move. I would say, or someone in the Orioles lineup needs to move. Like, absolutely. If otherwise, it's just stupid, and you're wasting players if you're the Orioles. So, yeah, I mean, going from the same point as you made with the Cardinals outfield, having too many guys, or the Reds infield having too many guys, I think the Orioles are the same. I think Mountcastle or someone there has to move.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I hate to be the one who ties it back to the team he roots for, but like a Mountcastle for Bellinger and one of the Cubs pitchers, maybe even like a starter and a reliever, just to
That's
give
so
the
good.
Cubs.
So good. Absolutely. That's so good for both teams. Like, if Mountcastle could get Bellinger and Stroman helps the Orioles so much. Like, their rotation's weak. I mean, it's not weak in that like Bradish and Wells and like they've been good, but they need another arm. And Stroman would absolutely do that for them. And like Bellinger is a great throw in for sure. Yeah, Bellinger, Stroman for Mountcastle. We just did this.
Let's just get it done. That sounds so perfect, Gray. Let's just do it. Just be done with this thing.
Also, before we move on, and we're because right now we have Ali Marmel is on the Marmel is listening, and he's like, yeah, get rid of Tyler O'Neill. I hate his guts. Before Marmel explodes in ecstasy, we should just say and move on. Before we move on to the call-ups, we should say too, like the closers. We talked about closers last week for trades, but since then, I've heard personally that Lang is probably moving. I mean, who knows? These are rumors. Rumors are rumors, but Foley in Detroit seems like a good stash for right now. And then also Tanner Scott. I think AJ Puck seems like he's gonna stay. So I don't know necessarily, but I've grabbed Tanner Scott. But yeah, I mean, just throwing out some closer potential trades. I think we talked about them last week, but just I don't know if we necessarily focused on the Tigers as much. So I would say Lang is definitely looks like he could potentially be traded. So we'll see though. Who knows?
Yeah, and on the closers note, Paul Sewell in Seattle has been rumored as somebody who could potentially be on the move as well. So that makes Andres Munoz fairly interesting. I mean, he's always been kind of a closer in waiting, and we never got the full, closer payoff for that. But nice to see him kind of get the job, and that's another guy you'd be looking for in those deep closer leagues. Yes, let's go ahead and move over to some of the call-ups, Gray. I think the biggest one of the week is Sal Frelick. He is the Milwaukee outfielder. This year in AAA, he had 40 games. He had 2 home runs, 8 stolen bases. He had 247, 333, 342 with a sub 10% K rate, a 10.4% walk rate. So he came back after the injury and was doing just fine. This is a guy who probably would have been on the starting roster had he been healthy for the season. Gray, where are you at on the South Frelick and picking him up in leagues?
So I was actually surprised at Frelick's fab dollars. The waiver moves this week were I got Frelick I think in 2 leagues, but the fab was pretty flat for him with 2 A's. Yeah, it was surprisingly kind of like I felt like it was going to be higher. I think I overbid a little bit in 1 league, but it also at this point in the year, a lot of people have depleted fab budgets. So, it's like some people just don't have a lot of money to spend. I hear Beat on saying, mm-hmm. Beat on spent all his fab in May.
This is factual. It was already like 2/3 gone by at least 2/3 gone in every league by May. That happens. I do it almost every year, and it sometimes works out, sometimes not. So this was not a good year for early fab. Honestly, there's a lot of swings and misses.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel that with my my Matt Mervis. But by the way, Bellinger moves, Mervis should come back. But I've already dropped Mervis in all the leagues where I overspent for him. Anyway, so moving on for the Frelick. So yeah, I think like if he were called, I would like to think at least if he were called up 2 months ago, fab bidding would have been a lot more heated for him, but because the budgets have been depleted, then I guess that's why Frelick's fab was kind of flat. Whereas like he's great. I think he's like at this point. I mean, there was some issue. I believe it was his. I want to say it was his hand. He had an injury earlier this year. I forget now what the injury was, but he had an injury, so he missed some time earlier this year in April. But he's back. He seems healthy now. He's like, he's a middle of the order bat for the Brewers. I don't see that changing either. Like he basically got called up and he was immediately like he hit cleanup on Sunday. Like he is. It's not like the Brewers lineup is that great. But any guy who's going to get, plopped right in the middle of a lineup shows you how much the Brewers believe in Frelick, and for good reason. Like, he's got a great hit tool. He's probably a 280, maybe 290 hitter, immediately. He's like, in the minors, he was barely a 10% strikeout rate and an over 10% walk rate. So, like, he's got a great plate discipline as a super young kid. I think he's probably, maybe a little light on the power, which is, a little, I guess, not great for fantasy, but he could get into maybe a handful of homers the rest of the way, like, say, I don't know, 4 to 6 homers maybe for the rest of the way. And he's got good speed. So you're looking at a middle of the order bat with little light on power, good speed, could hit for a good average. He's a pickup in every league for me. Like, as shallow as the leagues go, like he's, in some leagues, like a 10-team mixed league, okay, you have all kinds of options. But in a 12-team mixed league, like an RCL, he's absolutely a pickup. He's a pickup immediately. I grabbed him actually in our RCL league. I grabbed him as soon as I heard he was getting called up. He's an easy pickup for like a 12-team mixed league and deeper. I think he's probably like one of the last big call-ups for the year. Like he's probably it. And the fact that he's up already in July, it's good. I think also the fact that he's up means that he's going to be in the middle of the lineup. He'll be he'll be, instead of the Brewers actually going out and acquiring a bat or something, Frelick is like, that's like they just made their trade to get Frelick, basically. Like that's a bat that they've acquired at the deadline. He feels like a guy. I feel like he could potentially be a top 100 guy for the rest of the year. And if we're thinking about next year, we were talking about India earlier. He's probably not too far off from like the Jonathan India type model. Like, a little bit light on power. Like over the course of a full season, you're looking at probably 10 to 12 homers, 20 steals, 275 to 290 average. So yeah, a good bat. I definitely would grab him.
Yeah, and he's as you mentioned, good plate discipline. He's always walked. That's something he kind of has potentially over India, and is not the greatest at the on base percentage. So maybe there's a little bit even on top of that for run creation and that kind of thing, as well as we move forward. Moving on, Brandon Pfaadt was recalled by the Diamondbacks. They need some help in the rotation. I mean, they're just running on fumes. It feels like out of the. I mean, they got Gallen, and then it's like, who else can stay in the rotation and not get shelled and bombed out and depleted? That would be great. Um, Now that being said, in his return, I believe he had six. He went 6 innings, 3 earned, but the 3 earned were 3 solo home runs. Gray, not exactly what you want to see in a return for a guy that was having home run problems to begin with. It was at Cincinnati, so a little bit of a give him a little bit of a pass, but I was a big Brandon Pfaadt fan coming into the league. I still think he's going to be a good starter at some point. I don't know that I'm willing to do it until I see him, pitch a couple of games where he's not getting shelled with home runs.
Yeah, I think he's still a streamer probably in like 12-team mixed leagues, but if he goes out and pitches well his next time out, then he's probably going to get snatched up in like 12-team mixed leagues. So if you need an arm, I could see picking him up now just to see if he looks good his next time out. But I totally agree with you. He's giving up way too many homers still. If like homers are going to be an issue for him, because he hasn't shown really like airtight command yet. So if he's putting guys on and allowing homers, he's gonna get shelled still. Like it's not gonna get better. I wouldn't be shocked if the Diamondbacks, trade for an arm and he goes back to like either the minors or the pen. I don't see I don't necessarily see him as being ready yet. But yeah, I mean, definitely worth watching. In deeper leagues, you have to pick up a guy like that. Like in a 15-team mixed league or deeper, he's absolutely a pickup. But in a 12-team mixed league, probably still a streamer who could become a pickup for sure. So it depends on how aggressive your league is. In a 12-team mixed league, you might need to stash him now just to see if he's really good next time. But I have my doubts to be totally honest. I didn't run out and grab him for what it's worth.
Yeah, I haven't run out and grabbed him either. I have him. I think I have him in one deep league still, just where I've been hanging on to him. But that's about it on Pfaadt. The K's haven't translated either. I thought like if one thing, he'll still get strikeouts even if he gives up the long ball. That hasn't really translated either. So until I see either the long ball stop or some K's come along with it, I think it's like you said, it's streaming, and even that's pretty risky in anything that's not a fairly deep league where you're kind of chasing it. I mean, he did have to face the Reds and CES and Ellie De La Cruz and everybody that's killing it there. So it's a tough task in his return. I guess real quickly, we talked about CES last time, but he has been starting every day. Gray, is this I mean,
Yeah, it's
they
good.
seem
It's
committed to
good.
get him in the lineup, which is great.
It's good. Yeah. No, I'm impressed that they've been Christian and Carcion Strand. They've been starting him, so that's good. I mean, he was benched that one game but then he came in and hit a home run. But yeah, no, they've been starting him more often than not. So that's good. Hopefully, like we said earlier, hopefully they move on from someone in their lineup to give Encarnacion Strand. Actually, if I were the Reds, I wouldn't say Encarnacion Strand is off limits in a trade, to be honest. I mean, he's great. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, for fantasy, I want him, but he also feels like a DH. And it's like, how many DHs can you have? You can only have so many DHs on one team. So, but I think if honestly, this is going to sound crazy, but going back to the trade rumor nonsense that we were talking about earlier, if I were the Reds, I would send Encarnacion Strand to the Mets for Scherzer or Verlander. That sounds great to me. I mean,
Yeah.
and if I'm the Mets, I would do that. I mean, Vogelback they should have DFA'd Vogelback like 2 months ago.
I feel like they got to pick up some of the money. Again, the Reds not exactly a spending team, so I think if the Mets pick up some of that contract money, that they could get something like that done with CES or India or Steer. I feel like Ellie's 100% off. Like they would not move him.
Oh yeah,
He's
no, Ellie's no. Ellie
untouchable.
is like their Tatis or Julio Rodriguez. Like that's their keystone
Yeah.
linchpin. Like, yeah, they're not moving Ellie.
CS might be like number 2 or number 3 on that list, though. I mean, I feel like he's
Yeah.
for them. I feel like he's one of the untouchables. Whereas like they would move India, Fraley, Friedel, maybe Steer. Steer's turned it around, so maybe they're changing their minds about him. Senzel, obviously, they wouldn't mind losing. They're basically not playing him at this point. So
Senzel actually, Senzel. Speaking of Senzel, I saw this yesterday, which I thought was kind of crazy. He's had 3 hits in July, and all 3 are homers. Ooh, ooh.
still can't get playing time.
Oh man, yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on to Jackson Wolf. He was called up by the Padres. He went 5 innings in his start. He had 3 earned. No home runs. That's good. That's good. 1 walk, 1 strikeout. How interested are you in Jackson Wolf for the Padres, or are you at all?
Not really. I mean, NL only, everyone, obviously, in NL or AL only, everyone is worthwhile, but yeah, I'm not really interested in. I don't know if, like, I'm assuming that the Padres are going to move on from, someone in their rotation. So I guess that would give, Wolf a little bit more of a run in the rotation, but I'm not even sure he's necessarily in it right now. So yeah, I mean, he looks good. Like, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. At this point, like in fairness to Wolf, like at this point in the year for redraft leagues at least, like it's like a rookie pitchers are, a rookie pitcher or like a streamer. I mean, it's like, in the beginning of the year, they're a lot more interesting to me because, you could potentially get like 100 innings out of them. But at this point, like Wolf, for instance, like I just don't see him really throwing much anymore. Like they should shut him down by mid to late August. So what are you going to get? Maybe 3 starts? I don't know. It's kind of like, eh.
Yeah, I will say on Wolf in particular, he went 130 last year, so he still has, 50 innings just to get to where he was last year. So I don't think there's necessarily an innings limitation on him. I
Yeah.
just don't know that he's mixed league worthy, really. He has a 31% K rate in 17 starts. this year in Double-A. He didn't go to Triple-A. They bumped him straight from
He also
Double-A.
has doesn't he have like an 89 mile per hour
Yeah, that's what
fastball?
I was about to say. I don't know that you get a 31% K rate on a sub 90 mile an hour fastball in the major leagues. I don't know how many guys have done that ever, honestly.
Yeah.
Like that's really, really tough to do to maintain
Yeah, he sounds
strikeouts
like
without any
he
velocity.
sounds like a 6 to 7 K per nine guy, like a really like a streamer and barely NL only. To be honest, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like at his best, he would be, I don't know, like a Stroman or a Kyle Hendricks type, where it's like maybe
yeah,
he has good ERA and you count the whip on being pretty solid, but outside of that, like what's the upside on a guy like that?
right.
I mean, Greg Maddux was the best slow pitcher of all time. The highest K rate he ever had was 23%.
Right.
So let's just put that out there. Um, Forrest Wall was called up by the Braves as they continue to just shuffle in and out of the rotation. He might have actually. I don't see a transaction for him being sent down, but I don't know they've guaranteed that he's staying up for very long. But this year in AAA, he had 78 games, had 6 home runs, 45 stolen bases. Gray, he had 258, 360, 399. I don't know that he necessarily fits in as an everyday player, but if you're looking for that daily speed flyer, Forrest Wall might be it. And he's a lefty, so he might get in, late in games and get to play for a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree. I feel like most NAL only leagues are weekly leagues. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to play a Forest Wall. But if you're in a daily NL only league, like he's the kind of guy you put on your bench, and when he's actually starting, you just throw him in your lineup. Or if someone else is sitting, and even if Forrest Wall isn't starting, you put him in your lineup, hoping that he gets like a pinch run steal, or like just gets an at bat later in the game and gets a steal or two. Because yeah, I mean he's just a total Sagnoff guy.
Yeah, and it's not like their outfield is going to rotate a lot. Acuna stays in every game. Rosario's a lefty, and Harris is a lefty. So there's really not a clear platoon situation for him. But again, just speed for days. So if you're just looking to chase and sagging off your way towards stolen bases on a short day like today, especially as we're recording on Monday, you could definitely throw him in there and see if he gets a chance. I was talking about the rotation, and I was actually just mixing up my notes for our next guy, which is Alan Wayans. He has actually already been optioned back down, but he came up, gave him 4 1/3, 2 earned, had 5 strikeouts, 1 walk. I don't know that he's coming back up or when he's coming back up, but he got sent back down. So that means he's at least down for like a couple weeks. If he comes back up, are you interested in him? Because the Braves still haven't really settled on a fifth member of this rotation. Or even, I mean, they picked up
No.
Yanni
No, you
Chirnos,
know what's
but
funny though, because this is, I mean, not funny, but Alan Wayans, is he the other Wayans brother? Wait, no, Alan Wayans, I don't know, whatever his name is, he so dismissive. Whatever his name is, Alan Wayans is like terrible in the minors, then comes up and throws a great game. And then you have someone like Jackson Wolf, who's great in the minors. He comes up and throws a terrible game. That is so Braves to have a guy who is like a career minor leaguer and then just bring him up and have him like have a great game. Like, I mean, he only threw 4 innings, but still the fact that he had 5 Ks in 4 innings. I mean, he's not even a strikeout pitcher. This is like the Braves. The Braves just invent like new Terrans. Anyway, he's nothing. Honestly, the Braves, especially the trade deadline around the corner, like the Braves could just trade for, maybe the Braves trade for Stroman or Giolito. Like the Braves could trade for an arm. I don't think anything of Alan Wayans.
yeah, I expect the Braves to be active and find themselves a fifth pitcher and maybe even a fourth pitcher as they're coming here. I mean, Strider's obviously a great one, but where do you go after? And Elder's been great, but like you're going into a World Series run with a guy who's in his first real season, and Bryce Elder as your number two. Seems like I don't know if the Mets and Braves would work on something because they are interdivision, but that seems like an obvious kind of swap there, given the Braves' offense and what they can do. Jonah Bride was recalled as Ryan Noda heads to the IL for the A's. I mean, I don't know if there's a whole lot here with Jonah Bride, but in AAA this year, he had David 1 second, sorry. He had 10 home runs, 4 stolen bases. He had 316, 432, 568, 15.5% K rate, 16% walk rate. So, in a plate discipline guy, a little bit of power, but I think it's kind of an empty power, empty average type of situation here.
Yeah, I don't know. The whatchamacallit, the A's are just so like they just kill any enthusiasm I have about anyone. They're just like so bad. Even guys who are like really interesting, like Ruiz, who's obviously injured, but I don't know. I mean, Jonah Bride, I guess he could hit for average, in theory, but I don't know. I mean, he's old. He feels really boring. Like AL only, sure, but in mixed leagues, I can't imagine. Like unless he gets hot, then and anyone's available if they get hot. So I mean, or anyone's interesting if they get hot. So yeah, I mean, I guess potentially like in deeper leagues maybe like watch him because the A's could definitely be sellers. I mean they're always sellers. So if they move on from like Seth Brown, because right now Bride doesn't really have like a everyday job. So yeah, I don't know, he's pretty boring though.
Yeah, just not a whole lot there for our game's sake. So we can go ahead and move on. The Dodgers called up Justin Bruill and Johnny DeLuca. Nothing really on Justin Bruill. He's a lefty reliever. That's just as Nick Robertson heads to the IL. Jake Marisnick also heading to the IL, which is why DeLuca is getting the call up this year in AAA. DeLuca has 4 home runs, 3 stolen bases, was hitting 315, 375, 548 in 17 games at AAA. In AA, he had 32 games. He had 10 home runs, 9 stolen bases, and was hitting 279, 380. A sub 20% K rate at both stops, a 8.8 and a 9.9% walk rate respectively. If DeLuca gets playing time, are you interested in him?
Yeah, if he hopefully he gets traded somewhere, but as of right now, I actually have DeLuca in my an NL only league, and I'm not even starting him. Like he doesn't play enough. He's right now the Dodgers are playing him so rarely. Like they're playing him against lefties, so like occasionally he'll come in later in the game when a lefty reliever's in, or like if a lefty starter, but. Yeah, unless the Dodgers start playing him more, or he's traded to a team where he gets an everyday job, he doesn't have the at bats.
Yeah, it's pretty much where you're at. I mean, daily only leagues or deep leagues, but you pretty much a short side of the platoon is basically useless in most mixed leagues. And he doesn't have like crazy power or crazy speed, so I don't expect like that either one to carry his value in this late in the season. You need somebody who does a little bit more than just kind of accumulate throughout the year. Moving on, Owen White was recalled by Texas or by the Rangers. He joins the rotation at least temporarily. I think it was just a spot start, and then he's going to the bullpen. Are you interested in Owen White if he can get into the rotation? I don't know that he actually is.
No. No. I mean maybe if he gets in the rotation, but like Eovaldi, because Eovaldi is getting skipped and his velocity was down. I don't know, maybe Owen White, but it's like this is also another like trading deadline situation where I'm assuming the Rangers are going to be buyers. So if they get someone, Owen White's not going to have any sort of path to innings really, other than out of the bullpen. Yeah, I'm not really that interested. I even AL only. I mean, you stash him in an AL only to see if he gets in the rotation or if he gets like a spot start. But right now, I'm not interested in Owen White.
Yeah, pretty much same. There's just not a whole lot. And like I said, he may get a spot start, but that seems like all that he's going to be used for the time being. Mark Vientos was recalled by the Mets. He's been up before, and it's been kind of sparse in regards to playing time. Are you interested in Vierntos this time around?
Yeah, I mean, the Mets really should they should play these guys to see what they have, but yeah, I think Showalter is to blame a little bit there, if not a little bit entirely, because like they aren't playing Vientos, and I don't know if that not necessarily is a smart move because we don't really know what we're going to get from Vientos at this point. Like he looks like he can't like make enough contact to be really interesting because like every time he's come up he's sort of like struggled to make any sort of contact even though he has great power. So he could potentially hit for like 25 to 30 homers over the course of a full season, but if he's not playing every day and he's not making contact, he's more or less useless in any mixed league at this point.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much where we're at. I do think that he has the power to play up at the league at the major league level, but as you said, he just hasn't made good contact. He's sitting at a 29% K rate for over 19 games, 58 plate appearances, and they seem to be using him in a short side DH platoon, which is just there's not a whole lot for that. He qualifies at DH only in a number of leagues, so that also makes him pretty tough to roster, and unless you're just absolutely reaching in deeper leagues. Let's move over to some second half hot starters, Gray. We're just at the start of it, but so far, Alex Kiriloff in 56 games in the first half had 4 home runs. In 8 games in the second half, by the way, I cut him in the All-Star break in a number of leagues to make room for people who are producing. He's now had 4 home runs.
Oh yeah, you were like the biggest
I
Kiriloff
love
stan.
Alex Kiriloff. I will always love Alex Kiriloff. And this is what he does for me, Gray. I dropped him. I finally was like, fine, you know what? He had 4 home runs in the first half. I don't need like 4 home runs and a half.
Wow,
Like,
it sounds like Alex Kiriloff might be ungrateful to be done. That's not cool.
I don't appreciate it.
Wow. Wow, it sounds like we have an ingrate. It sounds like we have someone who does not appreciate Bidon like the rest of us. Oh yeah, man. Alex Kiriloff's been hot. Good. I mean, good for Kiriloff. Like honestly, Kiriloff is one of those guys where he should be a star. It's just a matter of like staying healthy, right? I mean, that's always been the thing with Kiriloff, like the wrist injuries, and wrist injuries are like the worst for hitters. Said Mr. Obvious, but I mean, like wrist injuries repeatedly for Kiriloff has really derailed his career. But if he can stay healthy, like he's always been considered like a future star. So yeah, I mean, maybe this is the breakout that we've all been hoping for. I hope so. I like Kirilloff. I'm a fan if he can stay healthy. So yeah, I'm definitely like I'm interested for sure. Like he's a guy I could see him potentially like being a sleeper next year and going all in on him and getting absolutely crushed when he hurts his wrist like in April. Anyway, I like him for right now, and I think he has like great potential.
Yeah, I think. I think for the rest of this season, I'll put him in like the Brian Reynolds category, where I don't expect anything to be great necessarily, but he's just going to do everything really well, and that's kind of the player that Alex Kiriloff is. But there's always been power there. If the wrist is finally healthy and he's timed everything up, he could definitely exceed that, but that's where I'm sticking him for the time being, and that's even maybe a little high because we pretty much know what Brian Reynolds is. So there's just a predictability factor with him. Austin Riley has 5 consecutive games with a home run. That's with 6 home runs total because he had 2 in the first game of that streak. I don't know if there's really anything to say because you're not adding him in any leagues, but I just felt like that kind of performance needed to be mentioned here, Greg.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's good to see Austin Riley, I think, hitting again like we all expect. I would say, I mean, he's going to be like like I've said this before. I remember saying this a bunch in the preseason. Like, I feel like there's a set ADP for everyone, and like everyone, like until like a guy ages out of that ADP, or if they get injured badly enough where it like their ADP falls, like a Bellinger. Or like anyway, Riley I think is like he's a 15th overall pick to about 30th overall, and like in his prime of his career, that is, and he's gonna like be somewhere in that 15 to 30 range, I think, for quite a few years. And I wouldn't be surprised, like he could bounce back in the second half, but it looked like he was going to be on the bottom range of that going into next year, because he was struggling a bit early in the first half. So if he comes on, I think he probably going to end up being around like a second round pick once again, like a middle second, 15 to 25 overall kind of pick. I think that's just his skill set. I think he is a 35 homer, 275, 280 guy in the middle of a great lineup. So he's going to get runs and RBIs. It's just ebbs and flows, and right now he's flowing, baby. Yeah.
Yeah, even with kind of his less than ideal start, which he's just kind of sat in that like 250, 260 range and not really ever gotten super hot. But right now, he is still number 1 third baseman on the player rater. Do you think it's like next year going into drafts, it's him, Jose Ramirez will be kind of in that group again, I feel like. Bobby Witt and Devers. Out of those 4, is Austin Riley going to sit at the top of your third base rankings likely, or are you going to go with kind of the power speed with Jose Ramirez, Bobby Witt?
If I had to guess right now, I think it would probably be Jose Ramirez, Bobby Witt, Austin Riley, then Devers. Probably.
Yeah, just kind of for the uniqueness
But
of the
I
skill
think
sets.
the 2 potential flip flops are the middle 2 with Witt and Riley. It could be Ramirez, Riley, Witt, Devers, but I think Ramirez and Devers are definitely 1 and 4.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move over to Nick Pivetta, who I'm just going to ask you, what the hell are we supposed to do with Nick Pivetta, Gray? He's coming in after an opener, so the win's not like necessarily guaranteed in a starter type of role. Came in to pitch 1 inning of relief on Saturday rather than getting his start on Sunday. So we don't even know when he's going to be starting. Like, what are you doing with Nick Pivetta, or just like the guys who come in post opener? We've now been a number of years into this, and these guys are really hard to evaluate for our game.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking this the other day with the like whatchamacallit, um the was it the Angels? No, Diamondbacks. Yeah, the Diamondbacks. They started the game with Jose Ruiz. The Diamondbacks started the game with him, and I believe he gave up like 3 earned or something in like an inning and a half, inning and a third or whatever. And then he was taken out of the game. And I was thinking, like, it doesn't help like your team to have a terrible reliever start the game. Like that doesn't help you. I know that they're trying to shorten the games for the starters. So like have the starter like if you have a good starter, have the starter start the game and only go 4 innings, and then figure out like see where you're at like in the 5th inning. Instead, like you have teams like looking at I think the Rays model of using a starter or an opener or whatever, and having like a situation where you're throwing a terrible opener and you're just putting your team in a hole. It's like, what's the difference? Like, like that isn't the point of using an opener. Like, it's not like let's use an opener, put ourselves down 3 runs, and then bring in the starter. Like, that doesn't help anyone. It's so dumb. I don't know. I mean, people are stupid. Anyway, back to your question about Pivetta. He looks great in relief. I don't know why. I don't
He can't start the
understand
game though.
I don't understand why he would look so good in relief, but man, he looks good in relief. Like his reliever numbers are off the charts. Like him as a reliever so far, he has like a 13, was it 12 something, 12K per nine? Oh, 13, a 13K per nine, 13.3 K per nine as a reliever versus a 9.5 as a starter. His walks are way down as a reliever. Like his reliever numbers are like off the charts good. He has like 2.25 ERA as a reliever versus a 6.3 ERA as a starter in essentially the same amount of innings as a starter versus a reliever. So it's like, damn. I mean, he's notably better as a reliever. I don't understand why that would be. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's just better with more time in the pen to warm up. I don't even know. I don't honestly, because then as a starter you would have so much time. Maybe he's better with less time. I don't know. I have no idea. It's super puzzling. But you know what? If anyone's going to puzzle us, Nick Pivetta will be the one to puzzle you. I mean, he's been puzzling for years. So the fact that he's still puzzling, I mean, it kind of makes sense that he's the one who's really just like crazy numbers for a reliever versus a starter. I don't know. I don't get it, but I would pick him up and use him if I had room. And, just because of that last relief appearance that he had, off of the strength of that alone, I would use him for for a little while to see how he does, because, it doesn't hurt to have a high K per nine reliever on your team.
Yeah, even in his weird mixed role over the last 30 days, Grace, he's number 10 on the pitching player rater. So, I mean, it's been worthwhile just to sit him in your lineup and let him go, regardless of his role. And you don't really pull him out. He's one of those. If you're swapping starters in and out, you leave him in because he may come in and be a reliever. But the numbers have been amazing as a reliever, as you mentioned. So why not go ahead and roll him out? Number 13 on the last 30-day player rater for pitching is Andrew Abbott. He just went 8 innings of no earned run ball gray, and he's been great since he came up. He has a 2.10 ERA. He has an 0.92 WHIP, a 27% K rate. I mean, where are you at on Andrew Abbott? Are you a believer? Is this just kind of he's hot to start his MLB career and that's all it is? Where are you at on Andrew Abbott?
With Andrew Abbott, I'm reminded of like Spencer Strider and other guys who like it's like pitching prospects are just impossible to guess at. It's just so ridiculous. Like Strider, I think of Strider because like no one thought Strider was going to be that good. And as we see, like almost 2 years later, like Strider's like one of the best pitchers in baseball. And everyone expected Strider to have like, everyone was like, oh, Strider is like a 2-pitch pitcher. He can't he can't succeed in the majors. Now, Abbott isn't a 2-pitch pitcher, but people were really concerned about like Abbott and his command. Like they didn't think he'd be able to like his command was so wonky, and in that park, Like if you're wild in the zone and you give up home runs, that's not good. Like if your command's bad, like if your command's bad, the assumption, especially in Cincy, the assumption would be, okay, you're going to put guys on with walks, and then you're going to give up home runs. That's not good. So it was really like I was pretty cold on Andrew Abbott. Like I didn't want anything to do with him. Like I really thought he would like just crush people, but yeah, he's been really good. He's been great. I don't know, man. I mean, his stuff doesn't seem that good. Like I don't know, it's okay. Like he's got like a 93-mile-per-hour fastball, and like there's definitely like the curveball is excellent. So I mean there's stuff there. I would have guessed he would have got hit hard. So I don't know. I mean, at this point, I mean, he's obviously a pickup, and he should be owned in every league at this point for sure, as he's pitching so well on a good team, no less. So yeah, I mean, I was wrong on him as of right now. I totally did not see this coming.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Rookie pitcher going into that stadium, not really a great mix typically, but he has performed great. So for right now, yeah, you got to roll him out. We'll address where he fits in amongst starters for next year. And when we get to that point, AJ Puck received the dreaded vote of confidence, as we kind of mentioned earlier. I still feel like he's going to be in the job until he just proves he can't have it anymore.
Yeah, I think that's the assumption right now. I don't know. Tanner Scott has been decent though, so we'll see. But I would say AJ Puck is the closer until further notice.
Yeah, I agree. And as much as I typically say the vote of confidence means terrible things, I think in this case it is kind of a realistic vote of confidence. And for now, they're going to let him keep trotting out there and taking his run at it. There's not a whole lot else. Jason Foley got the save Thursday for Detroit. We already kind of talked about Lang and his potential of moving. I guess it's Jason Foley if we're asking who gets the next opportunity, though.
Yeah, I think Jason Foley by this time next week. I think Jason Foley is the closer in Detroit. I don't know if that's necessarily going to mean a lot of saves because Detroit's not going to win a lot of games, but I think Jason Foley is going to be the closer.
Yeah, I think that's eventually what will happen there as well. Let's talk about some pickups, Grant, and then we'll get out of here.
Okay, so looking at the 7-day player rater, courtesy of Rasball.com, we have Alex Kiriloff has been crazy hot and available in a lot of leagues. Tristan Casas has been hot as well and available in some leagues. CJ Abrams has had a great second half so far, really been good and available in some leagues. Keibert Ruiz, Chas McCormick, Eddie Julian has been really good and available, and Wilmer Flores has been good and available, and Taylor Ward. Then we have Will Benson, Max Kepler, JJ Bleday, and Spencer Torkelson, hot and available. What you got there, B-Don?
Clark Schmidt at Baltimore. I'm okay with that one. Ryan Nelson versus St. Louis. If you look at if you're using last 30 days or last 15, 14 days or whatever, Ryan Nelson's numbers are going to look kind of bad. That's one bad outing. He's actually been really solid outside of that one bad outing, and I'm not really scared of versus St. Louis right now. Jameson Taillon, same thing at St. Louis. Johnny Cueto has made his return, and he's going versus Detroit. He hasn't gone, I think, more than 4 1/3 innings, but they've been pretty solid. A few innings starts there versus Detroit, not scary. Austin Gomber gets a 2-start week at Washington versus Oakland. Then Chase Silseth in deep leagues at Detroit is another possible option. So there's some streaming options for you. As always, if you have specific questions, you can find us on Twitter. I am at RazBeaton. Gray is the owner of the at Razball account. Find us in the comment sections, whether that is on Razball.com or whether that is on YouTube.com/RazballFantasy. where you can subscribe to our podcast, rate, review, wherever you're listening or watching us. We are starting up the football side, so if you want to go ahead and subscribe to the football Razzball videos, those are on there as well. Gray, until next time, I'll talk to you later.
All right, late.